Hey Manny, we have the internet weather for January 21st here. And this is the top 10 most probed ports on the internet. So the way we compute this is we look at scanning activity, and this is just by volume, by port. So for every port, we profile and see how much there is. It doesn't mean that there's a lot of scanners. It doesn't indicate a botnet in particular, but it might indicate that maybe a few devices are really interested in something specific, maybe a specific new exploit. So for this week, we don't really see much movement in what's been going on. It's the same types of ports that we've seen in the past. Maybe from week to week they vary a little bit. So what I decided to do is just concentrate on one of them that we've examined in the past, which is port 81 TCP. I went ahead and I looked at all of the scanning activity that we see on this port in just the last 30 days, just to see what it looks like. And you could see that, you know, there is, I think this is like between, at the very lowest, probably 60 or 40 million flows per hour. And at peaks, you know, you could see there's like 280. But it really varies day by day, even hour by hour. There's not like much consistency to it, but it's always happening, at least at the rate of, you know, 60 million flows per hour. This doesn't really tell us much, except that this activity is always going on. It comes in, it goes away, there's peaks, maybe specific researchers start to look for it. So I decided to look at our honeypot and to see what kind of activity do we see against this port. And so I only concentrated on activity that looked like HTTP, and just looking at that activity, I tried to analyze the different URIs that we were seeing in our honeypot, and then I used my own classification engine to figure out what type of activity are these scanners trying to do, are these probes trying to do. So I have a few categories I came up with. IoT, what I mean by that is this appears to be somebody trying to maybe run an exploit or profile a system looking for an IoT device, like maybe a DVR or a router or something like that, things that we've heard of before. And so when you look across the number of probes that we're seeing, about 52% of everything we're seeing seem to be targeted towards IoT. And then the other categories I had was pretty easy. PHP, this one stood right out. It was a lot of different ways to try to profile a device to see, does it have PHP installed, does it have PHPMyAdmin. I suspect people would be trying to like guess the username and password so they could upload files or download sensitive files and do some kind of exploitation. About 17% of the requests that we saw over the past few days kind of fit into this category. Then there was just general profiling, like just getting the root of the page or getting the index page or getting like the favicon or something. And so that's 27%, which is like, I guess, a quarter of everything that's happening, just to see what does the server respond with. And then 4% for SQL. So that's like a general breakdown of the types of requests that we see coming in on port 81 based on, you know, honeypot data that we have. The next part of the internet weather is one of my favorites because it's the most sources probing. And this activity, this is similar. It's a breakdown of all the different ports, but this time by the number of devices scanning. And again, all of the ports here are very similar to ones we've talked about in the past on the show. There's not really much movement. And this week, I guess the fourth place is in my heart this week because I'm looking at port 5431, which is in the fourth row here. And so I'm going to look at that a little bit. We've looked at it in the past, and it's always looked like this. So if you even look at some of the previous reports we did on it, there's not much movement. You see suddenly, you know, every maybe few days or every few weeks, like sudden spikes where a bunch of devices suddenly start scanning for the port, and then they stop all at the same time. So I decided to see, you know, where are all these devices? And where are they located? Perhaps it gives us an indication of where the problem areas are geographically. You could see, I think here, you know, at certain peaks, you can get like 40,000 scanners per hour, and that probably represents the size of the botnet.
There's still a big mystery around what it actually is, what it's scanning for. But you know, it was interesting to see Stan sort of give the global view of where it's actually happening and see where the concentration of that scanning is actually taking place.
The one thing that's different from previous times we looked at it is how much more distributed the devices seem to be all over the globe. So here I took almost 31,000 IP addresses that were doing the scanning, and I graphed them here on this geographical plot. And you could see, I mean, it's really clear where the hotspots are. I'm not sure it tells us anything yet. It's something that we still have to continue analyzing. But since we have seen this activity, this is letting me know that there's, for sure, in India, a lot of the entirety of India is pretty much lit up. So there's a lot of devices in India that are participating in the scanning on port 5431. There's obviously a lot in South America and Europe and North Africa and even the United States here, and several hotspots there. So there's a lot yet to do to analyze this, but it's clear that this is like a global phenomenon. It's not really specific regions. It's interesting that there's very little like in China, whereas previous botnets we've seen, there's many in that region. So I'm not sure, again, what this means 100%, but it is interesting and something that we'll have to continue monitoring to try to understand.
And what do we typically see on 5431?
I don't think we know for sure what's supposed to be there.
Okay.
So it's one that's still not fully analyzed, not fully well understood.
But clearly a lot of scanning going on.
Clearly a lot, but it happens very suddenly and then goes away very suddenly, but it happens periodically. And that's why it keeps popping up on different weeks that we suddenly see it and then we don't see it anymore. And I think that's it for the internet weather.